Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for joining us at a design subcommittee meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. Today's date is Tuesday, November 18th, and this is session A of the BCDC Design Subcommittee. My name is Seth Reisman, Deputy Director of Design Review at the Planning Department. The Planning Department continues hosting public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. Before we proceed with the agenda, I am required by the open meeting law to notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please turn off your camera and microphone if you do not wish to be recorded. For the record, the following commissioners are present tonight. Commissioner Easley, Gillies Smith, Coteritas, and Manfredi, and we are expecting Commissioner Morris to join us. Tonight's agenda will include two presentations from a single proponent team, including the first proposed amendment to the 2024 to 2034 Institutional Master Plan for Wentworth and an associated building project at 550 Huntington Avenue. Tonight's meeting proceedings will begin with a presentation from the proponent, followed by comments and discussion from the commissioners, and then an opportunity for public comments, and finally a discussion of next steps. And I believe I've elevated Matt, Anthony, and Michelle to co-host. Team, let me know if there's anybody else you would like elevated.
Nope, I think that's everybody. Thanks.
Okay. This will be the third presentation of the proposed First Amendment to the approved IMP and associated project at 550 Huntington Avenue, following introductions at the September 9th, 2025 monthly meeting and at the October 21st Design Subcommittee meeting. As a reminder, Commission procedures roadmapped up to 5 meetings to review the IMP Amendment and associated project. And from the group here tonight, Commissioners Easley, Coteritas, Manfredi, and Morris were present at the most recent meeting, and we ask that they be prepared to begin our discussion this evening. To the project team, please note that your presentation is limited to a total of 30 minutes for both presentations. We'll ask you to start in on the first part of the presentation on the IMP, and then maybe pause before you jump into the architecture portion to see if the commission would like to see the whole presentation or like to comment on the IMP at that time. Wentworth team, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just pull up my screen here. Let's see. Okay, everybody see this screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Great. Well, thank you all for giving us your time this evening. We're really excited to share some progress that we've made since the last time we met with some of you. I think we've been able to incorporate a lot of the discussion we had last time that was really fruitful, and I think has led to some good development in the project. So a brief overview of things we're going to touch on tonight. We'll start off with a little overview of the feedback from both BCDC and the planning staff to date and how we're responding. We also want to touch a little bit about overarchingly, like what makes some of the things we're doing and we're proposing unique to Wentworth. We're also moving from a lot of diagrammatic massing views and kind of overarching macro scale things into a lot more detail now. So we'll be focusing a lot more this evening on architecture and materials. And I think to the progression of the presentation, there starts to become a little bit of a blend between some of the kind of IMP scale issues and then the specific development of the Pike Residence Hall and the associated landscape, which is a big part of the IMP amendment. When we get to the landscape, we'll be talking about embracing the solar conditions within the specifically the Western open space and how we've evolved that design to be more flexible, also to be more coherent and simple in creating a singular gesture, creating a magnet for people in the West Courtyard. And again, really thinking about how what we are proposing is reflective of Wentworth and its unique culture. Then when it comes to architecture, we're really focusing on the advancement of massing option 8, which we looked at last time. We're then really adding a lot of development to the ground level facade and how that's also the ground level planning is coordinated with the landscape design. And looking at how we have simplified the facade of the Pike, clarifying the volumes, and in response to both comments from commissioners and also from planning staff. And then getting into the upper level facade of the building, really trying to come up with a simple palette that creates a sort of a really crafted material that comes to the ground where it can be appreciated and kind of be really reflective of Wentworth and their culture of making and construction, and also create something that you perceive is really interesting on the skyline, but also you discover there's more to learn when you kind of encounter it up close. And we're really looking at kind of a strategy of interweaving and layering within the facade in a way that is reflective of both Wentworth's culture, but also in the way that we're creating community in the building, and also introducing some color and warmth into the material palette. So just some overview of feedback and discussion that we had at the last subcommittee meeting. I think in general, most commissioners were supportive of the massing direction that we were moving in with that option 8 and the site planning. And there was the bulk of the discussion, I think, was around how to take the open space specifically on the west side of the building between the Pike Residence Hall and the Treehouse, and make that the best it can be as an open space going forward. There were some questioning of the massing, mostly from Commissioner Lubenow and Commissioner Eastley as well to some degree. Commissioner Lubenow had asked if there were other options that were considered. Last time we showed a range of studies that we did in the massing that were kind of in a very narrow band of refinement. So we've got a little bit of additional context on that. Commissioner Eastley had some questions about the cantilever of the building and the kind of the way that the Pike facade steps in plan and the way that it met the Pike that we will address. She also had a comment about maybe calibrating the placement of trees to where there is more sun based on the shadows of the buildings, and maybe locating trees in places that are going to be shady as a result of those shadows, and that's something we have addressed. Commissioner Manfredi had some questions around wind mitigation, specifically around the northeast corner of the building, which we'll talk about. And there was a lot of discussion around, again, the character of that west open space. And I think it was a really rich conversation, and there was a lot of discussion around, again, how to be responsive to where the sun will be, where the shade will be based on the buildings. Could we be more creative in how we address that? Maybe that means less plants. Maybe that's less natural landscape. And could it be fun? And also, could there be color within the landscape and within the building? There was some discussion. I think Commissioner Eastley had some comments about the north-south connection and how that could be activated, especially with mechanical spaces fronting on the kind of ground level facade in that area. There were some comments from Commissioner Kotorides about the east wall of the building, and could there be some separation between the glass wall and the solid wall, which we will get into. Commissioner Morris had some comments about the striping and the paving, and just a broader question of whether the Pike could be more creative and the building seeming a bit sterile. I think we had at previous meetings, the development of the visuals were pretty conceptual, so we'll have a much deeper level of kind of understanding of the building and materiality. And then finally, there were questions if we could make the physical model available, which we did, and hopefully that was at City Hall, and those of you who were able to, or hopefully able to see that in person. So just before we talk about some of the specific evolution of the design, we wanted to touch a little bit on what makes the project uniquely Wentworth. And I think this came out of there's a lot of really creative ideas about the open space last time and being playful and being colorful. And it caused us to really reflect on how we needed to. There's all the discussions we've had with Wentworth over their culture, what their students are like, how they express themselves, and how both the landscape and the building should be reflective of their unique culture. So when we think about what really makes this place Wentworth, we think about their focus on applied technology, their focus on making physical things and craft. And we kind of came to this idea with them of creating a building that was purposefully bold, that was kind of meaningful in the way that it's bold, never superfluous or gratuitous, but sort of very honest, but also bold in its expression. There's an idea about that we've talked a lot about in the planning and sort of the way that the plan is organized with these two offset bars, how the communities are connected between them. And that extends also into the expression of the exterior facade of the building. Just as much as the the treehouse uses color and has a playful texture, that is, it's very expressive, but it is also expressive of that institution's own unique identity. So we're really thinking of, how can we reflect Wentworth's own culture of making and craft? And we really started thinking about this in terms of what we could do creatively with the plasticity of concrete as a material, through utilization of texture and relief and shadow and kind of rigorous patterning, and also in terms of carbon, reduction, I should say here, thinking about concrete being one of the more carbon intensive materials, and thinking how can we create shadow and a dynamic facade in a way that is also very thoughtful about minimizing the amount of volume of concrete in the facade. And in terms of tying this new building into the existing context of the campus, I think that concrete palette is very much in the lineage of some of the more modern buildings. We have the very recent CEIS building here, which in this case is clad in a metal skin, but very cool and cool toned, and another kind of modern building on campus, Beatty Hall Campus Center. So tying into that palette, but also thinking of some warm accents and some kind of secondary layer of material in the building that could also pick on some of the warmth and detail of some of the historic buildings on campus, which are characterized by a warm toned brick and also some even more rich, warm toned ornamental detailing in the facades. So to just briefly touch on the topic of the massing studies that Commissioner Lubenow had kind of questioned last time, we just wanted to give a little bit of context that, on the right-hand side is what we were showing last time, which was a very fine-tuned, narrow-band study of different variables within the massing of the buildings. But what preceded all of that, before we filed the PNF and had to, hone in on a specific approach, were quite a broad study of other massing strategies, starting of course, with ones that were most in keeping and most in alignment with the 2024 IMP. So a Pike Residence Hall that was in the same location, but taller. Maybe it had a different footprint that had a different proportion on the site. It might create a little bit more daylight and different shadow impact. Reorienting the building as a more singular volume. And you can see some of the plant studies that we did here too. So we evaluated all these, and it really ranged pretty broadly until we got to the solution which we proposed, which are these two offset bars. And then again, what we shared with the commissioners who were present last time was the very detailed kind of calibration of the massing that we did with planning staff in between BCDC subcommittee, the first subcommittee meeting, and the second subcommittee meeting, which was really focused on trying to shorten the length of the building overall north to south, but also increase the difference in the height between the offset bars. So that was something that we shared with the committee last time. And again, this is kind of a section and plan comparison of what was proposed in the PNF versus the option 8 that we've been moving forward with, which adds some height to the eastern wing of the building, creating a little more hierarchy between those two pieces of the massing, and also shortening the building overall from north to south, which had some good site impacts, opened up some more ground plane on the north end of the building and potential for wind mitigation. So there were a lot of advantages to that. And that got us to this basic massing, which includes in the center, the Pike Residence Hall with the two bars that slide relative to one another in plan, with the easternmost bar being taller and having increased that height difference between them. The mass of the Huntington Academic Building, which has the kind of lower mass that's aligned with Huntington Avenue, and then the upper mass of the building, which sets back, respecting the Avenue of the Arts guidelines. But again, this is also one way that massing could be realized in that future PIP project. And then over to the right is the residence hall that would be on the center quad, and a couple other views from the looking northeast and northwest. So to talk about the development of the open space, I'll hand it over to Anthony and Mish.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to walk through the open space adjustments we made to planning for the IMP amendment, and then we'll pass it on to Michelle Crawley to walk through the near-term landscape that's associated with the ADB Pike Residence Hall project. There were some really, really wonderful comments, and I think it helped us unlock the significant potential for this to be a space of real significance, and certainly in the realm of landscape and campus planning in the city of Boston. We think these 5 themes broadly represent the feedback from our last subcommittee meeting. There has been and continues to be significant discussion about the challenging environmental conditions in the west open space, particularly the limited sunlight in the northern portion and the anticipated northwest and southwest winds that can at times create an uncomfortable outdoor environment. There was a really poignant comment from Commissioner Kim to try and create more coherence. She suggested sort of a singular gesture, and by Commissioner Garland encouraging us to develop a language for open space. And last, there was a lot of discussion about the open space had to do with creating an interest and a sort of a visual magnet. Space is so interesting that it will draw people despite the shady conditions. And last, there was a desire for us to explore what can make this uniquely Wentworth, to celebrate the culture of craft, of art, and of making. Commissioner Garland suggested that we, again, create this language of open spaces, and then Commissioner Eastley made this mention of her recent trip to Rice, which has these such compelling rooms, and it's held together with these incredible, memorable promenades. In the meeting, I think we immediately were thinking about the West and Central Quads, which are these 3 distinct outdoor rooms that are within a language, but are spatially quite different. This was an evolution that started with Stu Dawson and Sasaki, creating an open plaza in the 90s. And that open square was translated into an idea for what is now a very iconic pavilion by Thomas Pfeiffer with OJB, and then more recently with the evocative Sky Space by James Turrell. Together, they really create this wonderful, cohesive language of open space that is quite complementary to one another. And so we started to think about, next slide, Matt. We started to think about how we could begin to envision something like this for Wentworth, a series of open spaces that have similar spatial intentions, but take on complementary forms. And then Commissioner Eastley made this really powerful suggestion for the tree canopy to follow the arc of the sun, which we thought was a really great comment, because we have the opportunity for sun in the southern pockets of these spaces, and so why not embrace that? So we've moved trees in the southern portion of the spaces to allow sun to pour in as long as possible, and then we shifted the trees to the north side that's inherently a shady condition. This led us to an idea about trees shaping space, a grove on one end and a glade in the other. In the east open space, the grove could act as an outdoor room, anchoring the north side of an open lawn. And at the western open space, we're really interested in an informal grove that opens up in the center, creating a kind of glade that marks a room open to the sky. Next slide. We've also been looking a lot at shade, and in response to the concerns about plant viability in these shaded conditions, we've really looked closely at 2 precedent landscapes in New York that successfully embrace similarly challenging solar conditions. These are images of teardrop bark, which is what Michael Van Valkenburg referred to as having tremendous shade. The space has a lawn, but even within the help of 3 mechanical heliostats to throw light into the courtyard, the lawn area only gets about 3.5 to 4 hours of direct sunlight, and the remainder of the park gets less than 3 hours of direct sunlight. And yet the plants are thriving. So we've been looking really closely at the plant selection, which is largely based on plants that grow naturally in deep woodland settings. Plants like Nyssa, sassafras, Halesia, Fothergilla. And so I think there's a real opportunity for us to create a planted condition that can thrive. Next slide, Matt. Here again, a similar condition is the woodland flyover section of the High Line that receives less than 3.5 hours of direct sunlight. And here they really relied on a beautifully curated palette of woodland plants, somewhat uncommon for an urban setting, including an understory of ferns, aronia, viburnum, beneath a canopy of birch, redbud, and magnolia. And together, these subcanopy woodland species really thrive in shaded conditions and create a rich, layered planting experience. So we really think that with a carefully selected palette of plants, we have confidence that both the trees and the ground plane plants can thrive in the shady conditions. Go ahead, Matt. We've also looked a lot at wind mitigation. We're proposing a series of linear evergreen hedges at the north and south ends to help block the westerly winds that we know are going to be quite dominant here, along with marcescent tree species with an overhead canopy that will hold their leaves through the winter. And while our wind consultants, RWDI, are still in the process of actually modeling, RWDI has updated their report to note that the tall hedges are expected to help reduce the intensity of accelerating winds, particularly from the west. and southwest. And so we're anticipating this change will really aid in creating a more comfortable space for gathering. Go ahead. We've also thought a lot about Commissioner Kim's comment to create a more coherence, perhaps a singular gesture. And in working with planning staff, we've also recognized that this western open space is not a very large area, and that the multiple pedestrian paths to connect desire lines were sort of chopping the space up. So we began to think about the kind of great French landscapes, the Tuileries Gardens and Luxembourg Gardens with their really consistent, flexible floor of stone dust. And part of the strength in using that material is that it creates inherent flexibility. Day to day can allow free movement and choice to drag a chair into the sun or into the shade. And it also has the capacity to enable large gatherings as portrayed in this beautiful painting by Manet. Next slide.
Just to let you know, you're about halfway. And commissioners, since the Wentworth team updated this since the draft that we saw, there's not a sort of natural dividing line that I thought there was between the IMP and the ADB. So I might suggest we let the team continue if you all agree.
Sounds good. Objection?
Okay. And another quick precedent, Novartis in Basel by Peter Walker. Again, a really lovely example of how a singular gesture of a stone dust court with a cohesive canopy can create a really wonderful outdoor room and a strong node for a large urban campus. Pairing this with movable furnishings and a sculptural visual anchor in case of water feature, it really creates a year-round draw. And so we're really excited about the potential for a broad stone dust court to create the programmatic flexibility and the visual coherence I think that we're all aspiring for. Just a few more precedents. We're really inspired by Commissioner Kim's comments about creating a visual draw and encouraging fun so that even a shady open space, there's something exciting that creates a draw year-round. And we think there's an opportunity to use custom, unique to Wentworth, illuminated furniture that can create that draw. We think we can create something that is complementary to the illuminated benches in the plaza on the west side of Mass Art so that they are in some ways part of a family, all supporting the goal of building coherence. There was also a comment about overhead canopies, and again, this kind of desire for a singular gesture. We think that creating a large, iconic circular seating area could help create this visual magnet and help shape a sort of a secondary space within the Western courtyard. And last, I think we've also been thinking a lot about the culture of Wentworth and its kind of legacy and identity around craft and making. We've talked to faculty, and we see a real opportunity to use the open space as a platform for making and the display of student-led projects. From temporary pavilions to construction mock-ups, there's a real opportunity to put the kind of academic learning on display and for students to take ownership of their space. This is their backyard, and with admissions as part of the building program, it also, in many ways, is a front door, an opportunity for first impressions about the culture of Wentworth. So we'll share some thoughts about how these precedents are starting to inform the open spaces and the changes in the plans. We quickly wanted to walk you through changes we made in response to comments from both planning staff and the BCDC. On the left shows the open space in our very first meeting, and the plan on the right was our second BCDC meeting that began to embrace the solar condition and lean thematically toward a civic garden in the western open space with broad social terraces embedded within and below a continuous canopy. In response to comments, we adjusted sidewalks, added additional sidewalks to follow pedestrian desire lines. We added a new terrace outside of Mass Art to allow for more connectivity and engagement with Mass Art. And we shifted social terraces south to capture more sunlight. Next slide, Matt. And then after the feedback from last meeting, we made a number of really big adjustments and have completely redesigned the West open space entirely. And we're really excited to sort of reposition the idea from a garden to a courtyard that is flexible, active, and vibrant year-round. We'll enlarge this plan shortly, but broadly in the proposed changes, we proposed the south ends of the open spaces be open to the sun, and in the west open space created a broad, flexible stone dust surface that allows for more seating and more free choice to move chairs and tables around. You can also see that we've adjusted the building massing, which Matt will go through in more detail, to address comments about the shear wall, to more directly connect and engage the east and west directions. And along the pike, we've calibrated the active seating areas to create what we think will be a really comfortable space to be while shifting the building massing so there's a more optimized relationship to the pike. And last to the north, we've reduced the amount of pavement and expanded planting areas. Zooming out, we've also refined the northern portion of the project area, reducing pavement, expanding planting and tree canopy, and adjusting the path geometry to create clear, more direct circulation. Next slide. And zooming back in for a little bit more detail, we really want to highlight the updates to the building massing, which Matt will walk through. We've really focused on reshaping the ground floor to create greater visual porosity and stronger physical connections to both the east and west open spaces, significantly improving the relationship between indoors and outdoors. We've also simplified the south facade at ground level while maintaining active seating areas that engage directly with the pike. You'll also notice we've completely re-envisioned the western open space to create more cohesive environment, one that emphasizes flexibility, framed with this large stone dust surface framed by shade-tolerant perennial plantings. At the northern end of that west courtyard, we're envisioning a loose informal grove of trees that opens at its center to create a welcoming clearing, and framing this space as a concept for a substantial circular bench that both activates the glade and defines its edges. And we see this as kind of an ideal location for displaying student-led work, bringing energy and creativity directly into the heart of the landscape. And last, to the east, we're excited about the opportunity to create a kind of complementary open space that is larger, sunnier, and defined by a broad open lawn for an informal activity anchored by a social grove to the north. And as we shared at the last meeting, this eastern space has, we think, the potential to support a really wide range of programming, from quiet study to performances that spill out onto the lawn, accommodating quite a full range of student life activities. And then last, along the pike, we've done a lot of work to simplify and to create more cohesive experience that repositions the pike to be both a path and place. And later in the presentation, Matt will walk through a series of eye-level views that will really help describe the landscape. And I'll quickly pass this to Michelle Crawley, who will discuss in more detail the near-term landscape improvements associated with the ADB project.
Good evening. I just want to quickly show since there be existing buildings along where to the northwest are the existing dorms, and then to the east is the existing power plant and Kingman Hall and Wilson Hall. So in the interim, before the east can be built, we are along that north-south path. We are actually pulling, this whole thing is a parking lot right now, and so we are pulling some of that asphalt away from the existing buildings and putting transplanted trees that are currently along the pike in the parking area. We also then have about 48 bikes over like 24 bike racks along Kingman Hall there. And then moving to the west, we have a bike shelter for about 120 bikes. And that is going to also be act as a screening between the service yard and the west courtyard, and we are improving the path between Mass Art Treehouse as well as existing Rogers Hall in the interim before that new building is going on. I believe the rest of it Anthony touched on. I just wanted to show you guys the first phase. So we'll kick it to Matt.
Great, thanks. Okay, so in conjunction with the ground floor plan and the relation to the landscape, there's just a little bit more detail on the interior aspects of the ground floor plan and some of the things that between meeting one and today's meeting that have evolved. Like I said, we heard a lot of comments both from Commissioner Eastley and also from planning staff about maybe simplifying the facade as it meets the pike, which we think is actually a great improvement. Also, in kind of creating a clearly identifiable volume for dining, we've moved the entrance to that dining around to be entered off of that west open space. Also pushing out the facade on the lower 2 stories in that area, the transparent curtain wall. Same thing on the east side, again, kind of pushing out the a plane change between those glass volumes and the more opaque residential floors above. We've also added an entry point to the bike room on the east side, and also significantly redistributed mechanical equipment. So we have more potential for activation along this north-south connection. And specifically also, as we widen this area, we also kind of reorganize the interior program. As you can see, compared to what we had before, these are resident director offices here. So now we have an active circulation space that connects with the bike room. It also creates room for seating along the window line there. And of course, shortening the building overall, pulling back the extent of the mechanical spaces, as well as the loading area that we had previously. So we'll now focus on the building exterior, and I'll try to keep moving. So I know Seth pointed out we're kind of running, the clock's running down. Again, focusing back on some of the things that we're really looking to reflect in the culture of Wentworth in the building design. That idea of being purposefully bold, being kind of thoughtful, impactful, and sophisticated, focusing on craft and making, and really also reflecting the way that we're connecting communities within the buildings and incorporating that into the design of the exterior of the building. So they're fundamentally two different kind of building material languages into the building. The orange represents the very transparent student common spaces, and the white on the right are the more solid student rooms. And just to keep it in context too, this is going to be a passive house building, so that really informs a lot of the approaches we take to how we detail the envelope and the way the building kind of pushes in and pushes out. So those common spaces are really about transmitting the warmth of the interior to the exterior, and then cladding the residential volumes with a facade that's reflective of the community makeup, but also the sculptural and finely crafted nature of concrete. So we've been looking a lot at how to incorporate different types of relief that could be really dynamic and responsive to the sun moving around the sky, and create a really dynamic presence on the skyline. And again, reflecting this idea of the kind of alternating types of social spaces in the building that induce a sort of movement up and down to create different scales of community connections, and how that is reflected in the exterior facade of the building in a sort of interwoven, continually overlapping kind of vertical connections between the floors. If we look, we have get this to play here. There we go. An animation just kind of looking again at the way that the relief in the building can be responsive to the movement of the sun and shadows, and create a really sophisticated but dynamic facade. And some references to that, again, on the left-hand side to the campus buildings, CEIS and Beatty Hall, and some examples of what we're looking at in kind of a narrow band of concrete tone, all in the very light end of the spectrum. There's a couple local buildings here, Stewart Street being relatively recent, a very light, slightly warm toned concrete, and Holt Hall, which is at Cambridge Crossing, the EF Residence Hall, also has a nice, very, very light gray tone to it. There's also this Australian building that we quite like that has a very delicate kind of textural faceting to it, and also a warmth to the color. And of course, many are, I'm sure, familiar with the Pirelli tire building that has a very kind of sculptural texture to it as well. But then also, I think, with talking with planning staff about introducing some color and warmth into the building, and really looking at how that could be kind of a secondary element that also kind of takes the warmth of the interior and brings it to the exterior a bit. Also ties in with, again, some of the historic buildings with their warm tone brick and these kind of more sculptural detail elements within the historic buildings. So we have a couple kind of traditional elevations of the building with it. You can see the difference in height being quite substantial between the east wing and the west wing. This is the treehouse in the distance here. As we come around to the south side of the building, the stack of social spaces that make their way up the east wing on that side. And again, we're really looking carefully at the interior ceiling and the lighting of those spaces, because you're really going to be looking up at those and seeing the ceiling surfaces inside, and really want to transmit the color and warmth of the interior to the exterior of both ends of the building. The north-facing facade is culminated on the top, the taller tower on the east side, with a special student commons and multifunction space on the top that really accentuates the top of the building. And then coming back around to the side of the building that faces the treehouse in the courtyard, and that being the wing that is lower in respect to that open space. Zooming in a little bit of detail on the typical module of the precast facade, we've really tried to make the windows of the rooms as large as they could be within, again, with the passive house design factors, but also looking at how we can create textural contrast between in the relief and the three-dimensional nature of the panels without making the panels too thick, to really keep the volume of concrete on the lower end of the spectrum with respect to embodied carbon. So, and we come back down to, this is an elevation looking at that north-south connector between Ruggles and the Pike. On the left-hand side, this is the two-story commons and admission space that's very transparent. It looks out to that future east open space. And then as you move your way to the right, on the ground floor are is the bike room, and then the second floor are resident director apartments in those windows. So as we really look in at how that material comes to the ground, we really want to make this very beautiful textural element, something that one can appreciate, again, kind of at the macro level on the skyline in the city, but also make it something quite tactile that people can walk up and experience and kind of discover something of a greater level of detail that might be surprising up close. So last time, many of the comments, I think, were based on the kind of nature of graphics that we had, which are really massing based and very diagrammatic. And now we're moving on to much more illustrative, hopefully immersive, experiential types of views to really communicate both the building architecture and the landscape that Anthony and Mish have talked about. So this is a view of that north-south connector looking north towards Ruggles Street, and we're looking at whether it's a metallic color that is incorporated into the curtain wall and to these kind of liners and jam projections of the first and second floor on the east and the west sides, as a way of sort of interweaving along with that kind of greater theme of the building, weaving those materials together.
And you're a little bit over time here, so I know this is the good stuff, but try to keep it going.
Yeah, sure. So we'll just do a quick kind of walk around the building here in a kind of scene by scene. So we're right next to the tree houses to our left right here. Huntington is right behind us. We're just kind of entering the pike. Again, this was a character that views, and I think just in context of comments about the cantilever and the step nature of the pike facade previously, in contrast to more detailed representation of that. So the west open space that Anthony and Mish were describing over here to the left, the dining transparent volume over here, and then beyond a singular volume for the student commons. Swinging around, looking north into that open space where there's the clearing closer to the pike, where there's an opening in the tree canopy and more sun, where there's more sun based on the shadows from the buildings, and then towards the back, more density of planting in that shady area, really being responsive to, and I think some really great dialogue we had last time with commissioners, also extending out that dining volume into the open space to create a break in the plane of the wall, but also really articulate clearly the volume of the dining, which is a two-story space and quite transparent. Taking another detailed view within that west open space, really looking at the flexible ground plane that Anthony was describing, a lot of flexibility for seating, the entry to the dining coming off to activate that space, the incorporation of kind of a warm color into the curtain wall and making its way up into the residential windows above. We have maintained the cantilever that was discussed last time, and hopefully I think it feels a little more integrated now with this kind of higher level of representation of the building. And looking from, this is coming from Huntington Avenue, looking south to the pike. This is where Anthony was describing this moment in the landscape in that kind of grove of trees. And this is not a permanent structure, but this is a stand-in for that place for student installation. So you imagine many architecture schools and design schools have a culture of making physical things, whether it's a material mock-up or testing something, and that could be something that becomes part of the identity of Wentworth and a way of activating on a rotating basis the space. So coming in with the pike, I think we've really had a great conversation with staff and commissioners that really calibrate the relationship between the kind of thoroughfare where you walk through the pike and this interstitial zone between the walking zone and the building to really make an active transition zone and really activate the edge of the pike, and also that kind of interior exterior relationship between the dining and the student commons. So this is the entry to the student commons with a simplified volume. That's just that whole volume is the commons. I think it's much more clear. And again, looking back, this is what we were looking at last time, and the way we simplified the volume, incorporated materials, that kind of warmth on the exterior and on the interior, the scale of the transition zone between the walking part of the pike and the commons. The view back towards up towards Ruggles with this projection of the lower two stories out to the east, creating a really nice zone for both circulation and for seating along the window line there, which will really help activate that connection and the kind of calibration or the relationship between the east side of those commons and the open space of the east open space, those kind of working together. And this one, just looking from the inside out to just try to understand, we were really focused on just that transparency and the activity both inside and outside, and the layering from inside the building to this interstitial space to the kind of walking zone of the Pike. This looking back towards Huntington Avenue, and then finally a view back from Museum Road on Huntington Avenue with the massing and material of Pike residence hall on the left, and obviously the treehouse to the right. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Wentworth team. And as I hand it over to the commissioners, I just want to note that Commissioner Morris joined us just about a minute or two after the proponent started their presentation. Linda and commissioners, please.
Thank you for that great presentation. I was at the last meeting, as Seth mentioned, so I'm happy to add some comments. First, I just wanted to compliment the team. It was great to actually see all of the comments on one page that we had made at the last meeting, and then to go through systematically through those comments. That was at least very helpful for me. I'll start with some of the comments on open space, since Anthony, you and Mish kind of started us off a little bit there. I feel like the cadence of open space is so successful. The one thing that wasn't part of the presentation, but is definitely part of the experience of open space, is that pocket park that's just like creeping off the left-hand side of the slide here. That pocket park really anchors Huntington Avenue, and as you come up the Pike, you know, having crossed over or walking along the sidewalk of Huntington, it does definitely form a gateway to the Pike. And I think that, in combination with, I think, the glade and the grove as you're coming along the Pike, is just terrific. On the glade itself, I really appreciate that a portion of that is programmed or programmable, and that installation is something that's reflecting the au courant, you know, whatever is being studied on campus. And I love the idea that that's a rotating piece, or could be a rotating piece. I love the idea now that the seating is much more organic. I was just picking up on one of the principles that you had, you know, crafting the future, which to me includes, you know, baking in as much flexibility as you can, which is easier to do in the landscape than the buildings often. And so I like that this organic or flexibility, you know, begins to find a home in the landscape, both with the installation and even with the seating. I also like the idea that the open space is beginning to play visually with almost widening the Pike. And what I mean by that is that that you have kind of a depth perception now of those two courtyards, the glade and the grove, and that lawn panel really becoming part of the Pike. And I think there could be some more done with that. Maybe there are more apertures through kind of the lawn panels or shrubs that come from the Pike to really allow you to think about the Pike almost, you know, incorporating a portion of those two courtyards. For the building, I really like the simplification of the facade and the forms along the Pike, and really appreciate you taking another look at the north-south corridor. I think my concern last time we met was that it would feel like a very long expanse. And so both architecturally, as you're thinking about almost shadow boxes on those lower windows, and then actually wrapping around that student commons, that feels really successful. And I think even bringing that kind of pedestrian into what's happening within the building, color does that, activity does that, program does that. I think that'll be successful in the short term and in the long term as those buildings get replaced. Just a couple of other quick comments. I really appreciate you repositioning the entry to dining. The reason I like that is, and it may need to be celebrated a little bit more with a little more color because I think it might get hidden within the landscape. But the reason I like that, where you have that arrow pointing in from the west courtyard, is that it begins to engage that west courtyard into the daily activity of your students, faculty, and staff. You know, instead of just keeping them on the pike, they now have to actually go through that courtyard, engage in the courtyard, enter the building from that side. And I think that that will create an energy in the courtyard that you might not have otherwise. So a few other comments, but those are the high level. I think that it's really, really improved, and appreciate you listening to our comments. Catherine, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Commissioner Easley. I definitely want to double click, piggyback on all the things that you talked about. One thing I want to share is that if I were to take a drone and go straight up from the center, it feels like more of a completed story. That the Wentworth story, like it's there. I get it now. Every decision that has been determined, you know, given our feedback, is showing up more to tell the story of your students and the history, both past, present, and the future. And I deeply appreciate the consideration of how that is showing up and all of the design choices, the glade and the grove. I love the concepts all together. I love the following, using the trees to following the pattern of the sun, which I think is absolutely beautifully genius. And I think it allows for curiosity for anyone walking through those spaces to explore what more is around the corner or behind a tree or whatever the case is. So I really do appreciate that. The second part that I think was probably my favorite part is around the exterior wall. It's so suggestive of the many directions you can take just from the building alone. There's all these different kind of suggestive arrows that are happening that I think is absolutely phenomenal in the design, that I think will play into the kind of options and choices that students or anyone experiencing these spaces can explore both subconsciously and unconsciously. So I just wanted to lift those up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Kathy?
Great, thank you. I agree with everything my fellow commissioners have just said and congratulate you on the further development of this plan in a way that I think is as expressive of the goals you set out in capturing a Wentworth culture or a unique expression of both the campus and the college. I think the things that I really want to call out, partly to compliment and encourage, is the degree to which you're using color. I know that I appreciate your description and the relationship of your palette choices in terms of what exists on the campus already and how the campus legacy has evolved. But I think in the places where you're showing punches of color, both inside and out, are really enlivening in a lot of ways now that we're seeing more of the building coming around as well. So I encourage that and compliment that, because I think it does help to contrast with exactly the other tonalities and other colors that you're showing from the campus's own evolution. And then I'm glad you're on this, because I think we're seeing a little bit of the texture choices on the building. I really like that, and I think there's a parallel between the tracking of the sun with the tree canopy and the ability of the building to also have its own expression at different times of day, different times of the year. In complement with that, I think this stands to be a really interesting building as you see it at different times of the year and day on the campus and be a sculpture of its own. And on the matter of sculpture, love the idea of encouraging student work on the campus itself as a matter of practice and ongoing engagement. So I think that really offers an extraordinary opportunity for ongoing student engagement, but also the dynamism that comes with that for the purposes of next generation, inspiration to next generations. So thank you. Really appreciate this presentation. It's evolved in great directions and really has come a long way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. David?
Yeah, again, I'm going to repeat what my colleagues have said. I'll try to keep it short. This is an excellent presentation and a lot of progress. I think I'm saying much of what Linda said, but I really appreciate the way you re-planned the whole ground floor in order to push the enclosed spaces away from the perimeter and pull the common spaces out to the perimeter and let the open space on the west kind of flow through the base of the building to the future open space on the east. I think that I think it'll be really, really successful. I think the building is the whole plan is really successful at the ground level, and this is a really nice. This is a really nice story in this drawing that you have on the screen right now, and the idea that those I guess that's south and west and east walls kind of disappear, and the ground plane flows through with these peninsulas of activity that exist inside the building. I think that's all really nice. I congratulate you. You made a lot of progress here. I think reminding us of a set of moves or studies that you made, I think really about a month ago, was really a good idea. The building has gotten significantly shorter in the north-south direction, and one of my greatest fears was that this was going to be a very long wall for a pedestrian coming walking on the Pike east, or not so much from west to east because you've already got a big building there, but from east to west, and in a way almost a barrier. I think sliding the legs closer together. I think you reduced in the last move 25 feet, and I think overall you reduced significantly more than that. I have one I don't know, question, challenge, suggestion to continue to think about, and that is that it is still from a view corridor point of view a big building. When you look at it like this and its footprint, it's not. It's actually two slender buildings that slide past each other in a quite elegant way. And I don't want to complicate the building, because I think what Kathy just said a few minutes ago was also right on target. But I do wonder about the very regular fenestration above the ground floor, the first two floors of the building. I think you've just done such a great job at the ground level, at the pedestrian level, and wonder what other opportunities there are above. And on the same idea of expressing, exposing, celebrating those places in the building above where students come together. and you kind of, and I don't know, because I don't know how that happens, but are there those places in the building that could just articulate the community made up of a floor, 2 floors, 3 floors come together in some sort of way that takes the energy that you've really generated at the ground plane and brings it up the building. But I thank you for this. Has been you've come back every time with really thoughtful responses to our questions and explored them and made the plan better and made the building better with each meeting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Shauna?
I was able to take my little 5 minutes in I had to step out for a call. So thank you very much for the presentation. I haven't seen this I didn't see the last meeting. So it's a really significant change, I think, particularly in the overall open space and spatial organization. And I agree. Actually, if you can go back to the plan just for a second, for a couple of the comments, but I don't know if you changed the Huntington Academic Building or not, the massing of it. But I think that the way that the open space is working kind of normalizes it much better. I do agree with my colleagues. I love the glade and the grove very, very much. I also like the pushing and pulling of the spaces. While you're holding the line on the pike, you're not quite holding a static line on the pike. And I think that's very, very nice, the little shifts. And I actually, and the color and texture is really, really beautiful. There's a couple things that I do have questions or things to work further on as you go ahead with the, this very lovely project. With respect to the stone dust, I have a couple of hesitations. One of them is snow removal. And there's something elegant about the plan, about these subtle lines that you have that, that diagonal line coming across. So, and I don't know if you're thinking that would be paving and, maybe an exposed aggregate that matches the stone dust or something. But I think that is something to think about. Okay. But I think thinking about the snow removal part because of the long-term maintenance of the stone dust. I also think that and this is a good view to stay on for most of my other comments. I think that I think we need to think about the project in the winter, not just because of snow, but because of the richness of the experience. And the stone dust is pretty quiet, which is totally fine. It's very elegant, beautiful material. But I think we also have to imagine the space without the student installation, because it may never happen. And so one thing that when we're looking at that building facade, that we've looked at so many times tonight already, that sort of beautiful textured facade with the color, I think that the bench has to have that richness to it. Because it has to be the thing that it's really the only object in the space, particularly in the winter. So for it to have a beautiful possibly colorful, but Wentworth identity. So it not doesn't necessarily have to be a screaming identity, but something that can hold the space. And the other thing, let me see. The other small thing that I was thinking about, and I think just the plain path. The path could also be richer too, this path going through. But the other thing from a planning perspective is leaving this open space and wanting to go to the west. I think that it's likely that people are going to be cutting through, because if you go back to the plan on the pike, because if they're cutting back to their dorm or they're going to, I think it's really likely that they're not going to go right to the corner of the building and go back down the pike. I mean, so I think either you're making it a significant block so that it's not possible to do it, or you're cutting a little path through the other end, actually.
Oh, down here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
the southwest corner.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just moving
Sure.
through that. So
Yep.
Mhm.
either cutting it through or blocking it, but I think it has to be one or the
Yeah.
other. And then the other thing, and I don't know if this is on you or on Mass Art, but
Mhm.
I don't think that the floor is at the same grade as
Yeah.
your.
Yeah.
So
It is
how,
slightly higher. Yeah.
yeah, or might be quite a bit higher. Well, I don't know what grade you're at, but I know that it was quite a bit higher than the parking lot, like a footer and a half or something. Maybe, so how that actually impacts, I think
Yeah.
since this is primarily your space, I think you would want to control, if that actually does happen, what that connection actually is, whether you build it or, they build it, but.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
overall, I think, oh, and could we actually just look at the connection to Ruggles?
Yeah, sure.
The zoomed out more.
Yeah, let me find that. Here we go.
Maybe the one that Mish was talking about.
Yeah.
So is this the one that Mish was talking about with the transplanted trees, or?
Oh, I
just
think that
would-
was in grid and zooming in, and yeah, let me go back to the
Okay.
phase 1 condition. Hold on a second. Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I did actually, I very much like these trees. So this is just the temporary condition. It can't be before the new dorm comes, but I very much liked these trees and these gardens kind of stepping through. And then when we go back to the overall, the one that goes all the way to Ruggles,
Mhm.
I was hoping that there could be that connection could go further. It doesn't have to be exactly the same thing, but this doesn't feel, it feels like it's still falling apart. As soon as you get into, you're kind of pulled in a bunch of different directions. It's a little bit jumbly. And if there could be this elegant connection that continues all the way through to Ruggles in some way, even if it's pulling you over to the other side in front of Wentworth Hall, but something that really takes you the whole way to Ruggles instead of, just part way.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's really an exciting project. Congratulations.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. Since we have a little bit of time, I wanted to follow up on something that David mentioned. It was on my notes as well, and that is just about the looking at each of the elevations of the Pike Res Hall, if we can. You guys have really inspired the poetry of this today for me. So I'm thinking about your project now in terms of this craft and invention and the idea that nothing in this construct is static. And so craft and invention is impacting the way that shadows and movement are coming around the building with the sun, and they're impacting the way that that's happening with the landscape. I kind of really like the idea that that's singing with the Wentworth mission. But I wanted to get a better understanding of how the different facades either express the sun arc or are kind of being designed, or the facets are changing. I think the facets are changing depending on what elevations we're looking at. And I just am curious about the story behind that.
Sure. Yeah, I can explain that a little bit. And also to some of David's comments, I think the room, to your question about the variety or lack of variety in the windows, Commissioner Manfredi, I think all the rooms, basically all but one per floor or per wing, are doubles, and they're laid out in a pretty specific way. That the furniture lays out on either side of the window in a way that's pretty strict. We have looked at, like I said, trying to make in the overall window to wall ratio with the passive house requirements, of trying to make proportionally inside the room, the windows are actually fairly large for the size of the room, but they are very regular. So we really kind of focused on the articulation of these, this kind of faceted surface that connects and creates kind of different readings depending how you look at it. However, so on the basically the east and west elevations, you get the sort of raking sun of, you know, the early morning sun that will really rake and make those shadows come alive on this face, and also the tower or the wing beyond. And then similarly in the afternoon, these facades will kind of calm down in terms of that they won't be getting direct sunlight, but then the west facing ones will. But then the ends of the buildings, which don't have, or basically these are the, you know, this is the end of the corridor right here, so facing towards the pike. This is the window at the end of the corridor. So at every corridor, you can see out both ends of the building on the residential floors, but there are no windows in the rooms on the ends. And the pattern, the kind of overlapping, kind of 3-floor overlapping weaving pattern gets sort of simplified on the end. So it does kind of wrap the corner, and the same 3-story module turns the corner, but it becomes sort of simplified as a way of sort of creating some contrast between some smoothness. There's sort of this layer of, or kind of interlacing of this more subtle pattern. So when you look at the corner, you see a very textural face on the one side and a contrasting smoother face, but still has that same kind of triangulation that moves between it. But then so each wing has a series of lounges. The east wing, the lounges face south towards the pike. So that's this sort of warm color that's making its way up here. And that's where, as I was describing, we're really thinking of the inner warmth that we transmitted through lighting and through the interior materials. And thinking of some architects I remember talking about, like the Seagram's building in New York, walking down the street and you're really looking at the ceiling and the composition of the ceiling and the lighting near the window line, and how that is like another facade of the building. So you're going to be really seeing that, looking up from the pike and seeing the repetition of the ceiling up there. So that's something we're really working. We're talking about a lot today, the design of that ceiling that you see through the glass. And then there is in the center volume here, which is the simpler one, which is really the core that has the stairs and the elevators, but facing south, there is a window in the elevator lobby there as well. So when you come around to the north side, it's the same kind of smoother, but still kind of triangulated end. But then we cap that off, the taller portion with this very tall curtain wall at the student commons and event space at the top. And then we're concealing the mechanical equipment at the top of the building. So we've extended the facade up to conceal that. So this is an opaque area, but we're trying to create the same kind of unified system. So it feels like kind of one gesture and is partially transparent and partially opaque. And again, this is the corresponding typical floor level lounges that face the north side as well. So there is sort of, the long sides have the texture and they get the raking sun, the, low morning and low afternoon sun, and the ends get the kind of contrasting, kind of smoother treatment. And then so as we zoom in on, the actual panels, we've been talking to multiple manufacturers or fabricators, but really understanding their capabilities in terms of relief, what kind of resolution or how big the elements have to be to get the concrete to fill it consistently and stuff. But really looking at that as a very repetitive, but really finely calibrated sort of detail that makes its way around the building.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks for walking us around the building. Okay, so essentially the east and west facades that have the raking light or have the opportunities for raking light are the ones that are most faceted. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about the north-ish and south-ish facades and how those would be experienced at night. Because I think what's going to be interesting is that the faceted sides, east and west, are going to have a lot of daylight interest, and then they're going to kind of glow from the inside at night because students are going to be in the rooms and using those rooms and lights. But I guess I'm still trying to understand what will be the experience on the north and south, since you have some spaces like the common spaces highlighted, and those will have a kind of interesting interior glow at night, but then there are other parts of those facades that will be quite blank and dark. Yeah,
so we didn't highlight this too much. We're kind of sticking at the kind of ground level experience here. You can sort of see this is the ceiling, and we're still working on the many of the interior elements both on the ground floor and up above. But you can sort of see this is one of the student commons that faces south towards the pike, where we're looking at a combination of, a solid portion of the ceiling that then gets peeled back and painted a color to get a little bit more height that we can also illuminate. And that'll be something you'll see both on the side facing the pike and also facing to the north. And those will happen. And one of the ideas we're looking at is when you see that transparency in the light, that same idea of these alternating amenity or common spaces, that there's just a different pair of types every other floor. So it's a sort of A-B pattern. It could also be reflected in the lighting that you see through the glass. So it would be sort of make its way, every other floor. It could alternate in a way that's also reflective of the sort of variety that's happening inside. Let's see if there's, you can sort of see it over here too. This view from sort of into the landscape on the east side, you can start to see the, excuse me, the commons there too. And certainly if you look up, you'll see those repeating up there. But yeah, it's true that on the residential sides, you'll get the, the typical residential, because it's not an office building and it probably won't have like the whole floor has the lights turned on. You'll get
Right,
the
sure.
very animated,
Right.
every different lighting levels and different colors and posters and blankets hanging on the walls and all the things. That's one of the things I really like is, if you create a sort of a very orderly container, then you can have the vibrancy of like everybody's individual expression within it, within the kind of
the container for chaos.
Yeah, exactly. If the container has some comments that can, it doesn't feel overwhelmed by but that's what really animates things, the individuality of the students, the colors of lights they have, the things they hang on the walls, all, one has a desk lamp, one has a ceiling lamp, and you'll just get, that kind of residential. And because every room has one window, it's really going to be quite a variety of, the lighting in the evening.
And on the north side too, Matt?
Yeah, so the north side,
that facade up again.
Yeah. So if you come back here, this is the ends of the corridors here.
So it's a little more blank, right? We're reading this properly.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, these are quite, this is quite narrow. I mean, it's if you look at the width of, or the width of the north face of the treehouse, it has a different type of unit. It has suites, which I believe, which have bathrooms inside. So it's a wider building, even though it's sort of got a little bit of a split in it. But the width of this is pretty narrow because there are shared restrooms. So every room is basically, beds, desk, wardrobe. So that this end is quite slender. And then this is the stack of commons that are facing the north as well. So those will have that same kind of transparency, the lights on. We're really, designing the ceiling that you'll see inside on that side as well.
So I would just say, as you continue to develop this, particularly the north side, this is the side that's going to be read from the Avenue of the Arts, and creating as much visual interest for this side, knowing that we're looking at kind of the end of a stair core here, I think would be great. Would be kind of maybe a next step to kind of look at and refine.
Sure.
And
yeah,
just,
can
I just wanted to follow up on something. You don't have to show it, but I think and you probably are doing this already, but in your studies, I think getting the color of the treehouse in at the same time as you're studying, you've probably started to look at that already, but.
Yeah, and I think that's where we look at, I mean, there's in Wentworth's color palette of their brand identity, they have this really kind of goldenrod color, which is quite nice and goes really nice with concrete. But it's also that if we go that, there's the paint color of that kind of goldenrod, or the more like lighter brass tone, or I'm sorry, not brass, bronze tone that, we're looking at the two alternates for the window frames. But both of those, I think, have a nice complementary color palette to the treehouse, which we've kind of, muted or subdued in this particular rendering. But the warmth of those materials, I like that. We've always from the very beginning thought, like, how are these things going to be in dialogue on the skyline? And the idea of like having the predominantly colorful treehouse on the one side, and then this one that kind of inverts the color. It's more neutral, but it has like accents of color versus being the majority of it being color. So there's sort of hopefully a nice dialogue between those two on the skyline. But to your comment, Commissioner Eastley, I think, we do have a little bit of work to do, I think, on the kind of center element here. And I think also recognizing that this is the side of the building that will not get the raking light. The south end will get very, much more vertical light than the sides, but this side will be, will not have that kind of characteristic to it. So that's something we'd definitely be, looking at further as this evolves.
It's tricky because you don't have a place to put a good back back door or back facade, right? You don't have a back of house. You don't. And so you have this building in the round, and this happens to be the view that I'm concerned about because it's your most public view from Huntington. And so, you know, what cleverness can you incorporate to maybe minimize the idea that we're looking at the stair core and maximize the sculptural quality, or draw your eye back to where the student rooms will be anyway?
Yeah. Well, I think there's in some of the views we had in the previous meeting where we had a few views moving along Ruggles, and you see it sort of as your perception. So this is one particular point of view. You're actually looking kind of diagonally because you're
right. I see that on the map. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're actually, you know, as you move to the left to the other side of Huntington, for example, or along Ruggles, you're going to see kind of both facades at the same time. You'll start to see the textures, you know, the textured side and the smoother side coming together. So, you know, we can always bring back, or, you know, bring up to the same level some of those other views, because it is a very, you know, as you say, there's no back, but it's also something you're always moving around.
Right.
So this is, you know, just kind of a point in time of something you'll be moving along, whether you're walking down the street, riding a blue bike, or on the T here.
Yeah, because you're not ever orthogonal.
Yeah.
I don't see any other commissioner hands. Seth, do we have any public comment?
Yes, so let's switch over to that before we talk next steps. So a reminder that starting January 1st, 2026, the Commission will limit live public commentary to the project's introduction. Members of the public interested in submitting comments to the Commission are encouraged to do so in writing by emailing them to bcdc@boston.gov at any phase of the project's review. However, until then, we continue to take live public commentary during subcommittee meetings. So at this time, we invite any members of the public in attendance who wish to contribute public comments to raise your digital hand, and I will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep comments to 2 minutes. And not seeing any raised hands, so last call for public comment. Not seeing any commissioners, I will close the public comment period and turn it back to you all for discussion of next steps, and also ask for any sort of very clear direction to give the proponent as they prepare for the next step.
So Seth, I'm hearing pretty broad support from commissioners attending tonight for this direction. I know that we could do another subcommittee, but I guess I would put a suggestion on the table that that might be better, you know, time better used working with the planning department, getting the proponent team ready for the full commission meeting. I think we've heard a little bit about landscape, particularly Shauna's comments about imagining kind of what wintertime and maintenance means for coloration and detailing and ground materials. I think we've heard a little bit of comment for thinking about kind of all sides of the building. And otherwise, I think that there were some, you know, smaller things, and I was watching Matt and Anthony taking good notes throughout this. I think you've got a lot of those recorded. Commissioners, any other kind of bold ideas that you'd like the team to work on, and also whether you would support having them shift to the full commission as their next meeting?
I gave most of my comments, or I gave my comments, and I think the team, I suspect, heard them. So I would support it going to the full commission.
I support it going to full commission as well. I do think your comments, Linda, about especially in the north, but also the north and south, the slender proportions, which are really quite wonderful. but maybe feel the least developed of the exterior envelope. And I would encourage them. I'm sure they are working on that, but show us progress when they come back to full commission.
Kathy or Catherine, thoughts about next steps?
I'm in complete agreement that it's ready to go to full commission.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there's been a lot of change and since the last one that this team has taken to heart. So I think the subtle but important critiques that have been suggested, I think, shouldn't get in the way of them moving to full commission.
Thanks, Catherine. All right, I think we have clear direction.
Yes, and planning staff will certainly work with the proponent on all of the comments offered here tonight. And hearing no additional comments at this time, and in lieu of a formal vote, commissioners, it is my understanding that the project is recommended for final consideration and recommendation by full commission. There are no formal provisos at this meeting because there's no vote occurring, but I think all the comments here tonight will be very useful as the proponent team continues to develop this and bring it back to you for full commission.
Sounds good.
And with that, we look forward to that day, hopefully sometime soon. And thank the proponent team for your time, members of the public who attended, and commissioners, as always, for your time.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a good
you.
evening.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.